Hey, it's Michael, and this is the Kintsugi Podcast. I'll be back in a minute with this week's conversation about resilience. But first, if you wish to create a better life and have a better career, then please visit michaelobrienshift.com and download your free workbook on how to create a better life. In it, you'll discover ways to find more energy for the things and the people who matter most to you, so you can create a better tomorrow. Hey there's Michael. Welcome back or welcome to the Kintsugi Podcast. It's time for another conversation about resilience. And today we have a wonderful story of resilience. Our special guest is Gill. She goes by Stoma Chameleon on Instagram. And her story just blew me away. My wife, who is a childbirth doula, first heard Gill speak at a conference and immediately got off and sent me a text and said, "You need to follow this woman. Her story is amazing." Obviously, my wife knows I geek out on stories of resilience and positivity. You'll hear more about Gill's story, but it started when she was in her ideal job, her dream job, pregnant with their first child, and then she had a very traumatic birth experience. So she shares details about her birthing experience and what happened during the course of a few days and a few weeks. So fair warning, if you're a little squeamish, you may want to skip through that section, but I hope you'll stay with our conversation, because what comes out of it is a person who hit rock bottom, but found a way out, found the positivity, the gratitude, the acceptance of her situation, of her journey. There's so many parallels between her story and my story of my last bad day. Obviously, our traumas completely different. But the things that helped us get through it were very much the same. She is an inspiration. I think you'll be just blown away by her positivity and what she's planning to do, or what she's already done since her traumatic birth experience. She's preparing to swim across the English Channel, but there's more to it. So I don't want to spoil her story. I want you to dive in and listen to it, because you'll be inspired by her resilience, by her positivity, by her grit. So I invite you to sit back, grab your tea, grab your coffee, whatever you do as you get your podcasts on, and listen to the inspirational story of Gill. Hey, Gill, how's it going?
Hi, Michael. I'm very good. Thank you. How are you?
Great. I can't wait for this conversation. So I first heard your whole story from my wife. She was attending a birthing conference, and I forget which one actually in this moment, but she heard you speak and she got off the Zoom, I guess, because it's all pandemic conferences. And she was like, "You need to follow this woman. You need to connect with this woman. She has such an incredible story." She was beaming. And my wife is a tough critic, so she doesn't necessarily get into a lot of that inspirational, motivational stuff sometimes with conferences. But your talk really lit her up. So thank you for that.
Thank you very much. Thank you. It was the International Birth Care Conference, by the way.
Oh,
there you go.
Okay, cool. All right. Now that I know, I should know that as a proper husband, I should have remembered that. But thank you for that. That's pretty cool. So we're going to get into your story. But first, what I'd love to start, just to frame out our conversation, how do you define resilience?
Well, I think that's actually very tricky, because you can answer that very simply. And for me, on a very basic level, resilience is just simply carrying on, just keeping going. But that's very basic, really. Resilience for me is actually quite complicated, as it is for most people, I suppose. And it's very closely connected to acceptance. So I think if you've got an acceptance of whatever the situation is that you're in, then that can lead to some sort of form of resilience, if you like. If you can accept what's happening, then you can keep on moving forward with your life. And so for me, resilience and acceptance, they're sort of one and the same thing, really. One leads to the other.
I love that answer, because reading through your story and also just parallels to mine, in the beginning, I had maybe some awareness, but I didn't have acceptance. The way I would say it, I was arguing with reality.
Yeah.
Thinking like, this shouldn't have happened. This is so unfair. Why'd this happen to me? My driver shouldn't have been driving that day, this, that, and the other thing. And what I finally realized is that whether it's God, universe, or Mother Nature that you might talk to, they win 100% of their arguments. And so
Yeah.
does
Yeah.
reality. And so the more I could get into acceptance, I didn't necessarily have to like the situation, but I at least had to accept that what happened happened. And, based on reading about your story and hearing about your story, I take it that was a big pivot point for you, just accepting what happened.
Yeah, absolutely. I had to. The thing is with life, there's no point in fighting things that you can't do anything about. So for me, there was literally nothing I could do about my situation. There was nothing I could do about what had happened. There was nothing I could do about the effect on my body. So if I didn't accept all of that, then I would just be stuck forevermore in a really unhappy place. So I think what a lot of people don't realize is you've got a lot more control over your emotions and how you react to things than you think. And for me, it was pretty much a fork in the road. Am I going to go down the road of not accepting what's happened, fighting against it all the time, wondering why it's happened? Or am I just going to go, right, well, this is what's happened. Can't do anything about it. Let's make the most of what you've got. And it was a conscious decision for me. And that's sort of been the basis of my life ever since, really. Just crack on. It's what
I
we say
love
in the UK.
it. Just crack on. That's so perfect. So let's get into the story. So we sort of danced around the edges. We've, have alluded to
Yeah.
it. So the audience is probably like, well, what's the story, Michael? What's the story, Jill? So share the story with us. Because
Okay.
it's really so fascinating and it's just beautiful and inspirational.
Okay. So I am now 41, but if we go back to when I was 32, I was a serving police officer in the UK. I worked in a really, really busy city centre in Bradford. And really fit, really healthy, energetic, happy, just living my best life, really. I'd always wanted to be in the police. So it took me a couple of years to get in. I got in and the job was everything I expected it to be and hoped it to be. This is back in 2011 and I fell pregnant. Now, as I've already said, I was very fit and healthy. My pregnancy was pretty straightforward. I fell pregnant easily. There was nothing to suggest that anything was going to happen during the labour or anything like that. But unfortunately, I went into what is clinically called spontaneous labour, which normal people call premature labour. So I went into premature labour with my baby at 6 weeks, 6 weeks early. He was 34 weeks.
Okay.
I was 34 weeks pregnant at that time. So when you have a baby, I'm not going to go into graphic details, but basically when you have a baby, the baby helps himself be born, okay? But because
Yes.
my baby was so little, he was only 4 pounds 7, he got really tired when he was trying to come out. His heart rate started to crash. All panic, everyone was panicking, all hell broke loose, and they had to whip him out really quickly using forceps, which is a really common way of, dealing with an emergency in the birthing room.
Yep.
So this was all fine. They got him out, and he was absolutely fine. Luckily, they worked on his lungs for a little bit, but he was fine. I was told that I'd had a bad tear, which a lot of women do experience when they have a baby. And again, I wasn't really concerned. I sort of thought, right, fine, I've had a tear.
Fine. Yeah.
I'll just deal with it. There was a lot of sort of female ego, if you like, because I thought, right, well, I'm not going to make a fuss about this because women give birth all the time. So I'm not going to make a fuss. Whatever the result is, no matter how painful it is, I'm just going to get on with it.
You're going to be strong.
Yeah, I'm just going to be strong. I'm going to
Yeah.
crack on. So anyway, it wasn't long after I'd had the baby. So the next day, the next morning, I was in a lot of pain. If we fast forward a few days, I essentially spent 3 or 4 days hardly able to walk, in agony, nobody listening to me. And eventually I collapsed in the corridor and I was found by a midwife who realised, things were not as they should be. And I was actually incontinent by that point. And
Oh, wow.
that's when I had stool coming out everywhere, and it was absolutely hellish, was the only way to describe it. It was
Yes.
really frightening, actually, because I'd never not been in control of my body before. So that was quite frightening. And anyway, as a result of this, I was examined, and they realised I had a 4th degree tear, which essentially means, I'm sorry guys, but this is what it means.
It's reality, right? So yeah, it's reality.
It's reality. Basically torn into all the way through your vagina, all the way through your rectum, through your sphincter, and I had no control, and there was stool, feces going everywhere.
Everywhere.
This was this was missed, so I wasn't repaired properly. This led to a huge abscess, and that's why I basically collapsed, because this was starting to turn septic.
Mm-hmm.
This abscess had then burst and caused a rectovaginal fistula, which is a hole between the rectum and the vagina. So you've got stool coming out of the vagina.
Yes.
So, I was in I couldn't have been in more of a mess. And they actually had to examine me under gas and air because they couldn't get anywhere near me.
Yes.
So as a result of this examination, they said, right, we're going to have to give you a stoma. We're going to have to give you a colostomy, because we need to divert the feces away from this infected area. We need to give it a chance to heal. Now, for the people who don't know what a colostomy is, which I didn't at the time, bearing in mind I had a 7-day-old baby, and this is the operation I was facing.
Yes.
A colostomy is when you take out the large intestine, you take it out of a hole in the abdomen, and the bit of the bowel that's out on your stomach there, that's called the stoma. And out of there comes your feces, and it goes into a bag that's attached onto your abdomen, and that's a stoma bag.
Yes.
So this is a pretty major operation, and this is a pretty major thing to try and get your head round at the age of 32, that, right, I'm not going to be going to the toilet out of my bottom anymore. I'm going to be going into a bag on my abdomen.
And it's like just weeks later, you were like feeling good, strong, fit, early 30s.
Yeah.
Life is great. Going to be a mom, like on top of the world.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then
absolutely.
all of a sudden, a roundabout, a 180.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So, but I actually wasn't that bothered about the fact I was getting a stoma at that precise moment, because I just wanted the infection to go away, and because they said it was temporary. So I sort of thought, right, okay, this is what we need to do. I can deal with this, because this is going to take away my pain. This is going to solve the situation.
Gotcha.
So another week in hospital, we eventually leave. And my husband, because I like my life to be as complicated as possible. So my husband is an offshore diver, so he had to go back to work offshore. And I couldn't drive. All my family were 150 miles away. So I didn't have anybody to help me. So my mum actually had to come down and help me for 3 weeks. But essentially that very first year, I was on my own a lot of the time, because my husband wasn't there. I didn't have any family. And I was dealing with this new stoma bag, which kept leaking all the time. I had a septic fistula tract, which meant I couldn't walk really much at all. So I always gauge it by a walk that I used to do all the time. And before I had Sam, my baby, it would take me 15 minutes, and it took me an hour and 20 minutes to walk that walk.
Wow.
That's what we're talking about in terms of how disabled I was. And obviously my mental health just crashed.
Yes.
I had postnatal depression, obviously didn't bond with my baby at all.
Yes. Yeah.
I had post-traumatic stress syndrome diagnosed, severe anxiety, and your standard depression, if you like. So yeah, that was all. And bear in mind, this has all happened within 2 weeks of having a baby, my first baby. So,
yeah, like all of it, like just having a baby alone, the audience doesn't necessarily know. My wife has a childbirth doula. You know that, Gill, because we've chatted. So I know a lot about birth and just the whole, the process leading up to birth, the whole birthing process, and then what happens after. Because, we talk about her profession. So just all that, and having, as a parent, there's so much involved with that first child.
Yeah.
plus all of this.
Yeah, it was. But then I had the extra whammy of the fact that I was then in the process of losing my job. And this, for me,
Oh,
out of everything, that has been the thing I've struggled with more than anything. So when we thought it was temporary, this wasn't going to be an issue for my career. But ultimately, what they realised was that the consultant had done such a terrible repair. She'd left no viable tissue for me to be repaired with. And essentially, this stoma bag was going to be permanent. And as soon as I
oh.
realised this stoma bag was going to be permanent, I thought, well, how am I going to do my job? I wasn't coping with this stoma bag at all. If I went down to the shops with my baby, I was having to hand over my baby to a complete stranger. Always made sure it was a shop worker, but the bag would leak, have to hand my baby over to someone, rush off to the toilet, clean myself up. It was just completely unmanageable. And my
Mm-hmm.
mental health was just so profoundly damaged that I just couldn't even cope with the conversation about going back to work. And in the UK, I don't know how it works elsewhere, but in the UK, they have quite funny rules about how long you can stay office bound.
Okay.
And essentially, I would be office bound because I wouldn't be going out on the operationally. I was the first person with a stoma in that particular force. They didn't really know what to do with me. So the ultimate result was I was going to be medically pensioned out of the police.
Ah.
And that, for me, that really destroyed me because it had been my life's ambition to be in the police. Absolutely loved it. It was everything to me. And being in the police is much more than a job. It's like a whole identity. You're part of a
Mm-hmm.
whole part, like a whole area of society that other people don't get to be in. I get to go beyond the police cordon. I get to go into the houses. I get to know what's happening behind the headlines. And yeah, it was that was absolutely devastating for me. And that's actually where my main sort of PTSD came from, because if I saw a police car behind me when I was driving, I would have to pull over until it
Mm-hmm.
passed. I couldn't look at the police car. I lived in fear of being pulled over for some reason. Not that I was ever doing anything, but I used to, what if I've got a light out in my car and I would be pulled over by the police and I would have to speak to the police and I would have to get into the car and I can't get into the car. I can't speak to the police because it reminds me of what I've lost. And that was really hard. But the police actually made me go into the police station for some of my appointments.
Okay.
And I remember the very last time I went in, because I refused to go in again after that, I met all my old team and I showed off the baby, which is, that should be a really happy time. It
Yes.
should be like, oh, here, I've come back. This is my
Yeah,
baby.
here's my
It's
baby.
wonderful.
Yeah. And everyone
And it was
goo-goos on the
lovely. But
baby.
then I was just thinking, but I'm no longer with you. Like, you're not my family anymore. And yeah, and I came home and I cried solidly for about 4 days. That was really hard. So again, this was all happening in the first year. And then we had the whole finances thing, what we're going to do about my money. Lost my job, lost my pension, my only pension.
Ah.
And in the UK, the police pension is a really good one. So yeah, by 2012, the end of 2012, I was in a total mess, massively overweight, mentally struggling, about to lose my job, in the middle of suing the hospital. And I wasn't in a good place.
And did you know anyone at the time that also had gone through something like you have gone through? Maybe not with the job and stuff, but just a traumatic birth experience. Did you have anybody like, well, or you just felt all alone? Like, I'm the only one that's ever experienced this.
Yeah. There was literally nobody. And when I used to go to the doctor, or like I used to get admitted to the hospital as an emergency quite often because of infection. And the stoma nurses, the GPs, no matter who I met along the way, all said, "Oh, I've never met anyone like you before.
Oh,
This
wow.
is really unusual." And you're like, well, okay, that's fine that you say that, but I'm a bit sick of being the only one.
Yeah.
So I did find support groups online for people with stomas, But again, I just found them all really depressing, because a lot of forums are full of people who have got problems. That's
Yeah.
why they're on there. They're looking
Yeah.
for answers. So every time I went on, I just thought, oh, right, well, this is it then, isn't it? This is my life. It's just going to be leaking bags, misery, depression, being overweight. God, that's it. Is that all there is?
That's it. Yeah, and then going on website forums and just looking to be heard and seen, and just looking for, like, in some ways, online therapy
Yeah,
and online answers.
yeah. But what I really wanted was some positivity and some
Yeah.
hope. But of course, all those people, they're not on online forums. They're off living their life.
Yes.
So I then came off the forums, and I read an article. I think I was in a hospital actually, and I read an article in a magazine, and it changed my life.
So what was that article? Because I wanted to ask you, what was that moment? So you, like, 2012, we'll call it rock bottom, and then where do you go from here?
So that was the rock bottom. Moved home, and it must have been about the end of 2013, 2014. And it was an article by somebody who had a stoma, who was an athlete. So that was the first thing. I thought, oh, right, you're an athlete, okay. And she said, I'm really, really grateful for the life that my stoma has given me. And I thought, oh, right. And that was the first time I'd ever seen anybody express gratitude for their stoma.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now, the listeners might not know this, but the vast majority of people who have stomas are people who have really severe diseases like Crohn's and colitis, which is, really severe inflammation of the bowel, or bowel cancer or something like that. So that was her background, Crohn's and colitis.
Okay.
But anyway, I just started thinking, well, hang on, what has my bag given me? Because it had always been focused on what it had taken away. It's taken away my job. It's taken away my bond with my baby. It's taken away happiness. It's taken away exercise. It was all like negative. So then I thought, well, do you know what? If I didn't have this bag, I would be incontinent, totally incontinent. So I wouldn't be leaving the house. So because I have got this bag, I can leave the house.
Yeah.
And I know it sounds really obvious, but I sort of thought, all right, so it has actually given me something. And then I started researching into how stoma products had changed. So I looked back to like the 1950s.
Oh gosh.
And I saw, the horrific contraptions that they used to use then. And I thought, you know what, Gill? Just get a grip. I mean, they're amazing. The bags that you've got these days are amazing. And at that point, I'd actually found the bag that worked for me. And I didn't really have leaks anymore. And I was able to do things. But I was like transfixed with the whole, oh, but I can't do that if I've got a bag, because it might leak, or I might get hernia, or I can't do this and I can't do that. I was like hiding behind it.
Yeah.
But this all started the whole thing in my mind of, actually, no, this has given me something, and this has given me a second chance at life, because I'm not incontinent. I can actually do, and this person's an athlete. And I do remember reading on the forums a lot of people saying, every time I look down at my bag, it reminds me of a terrible trauma that I've been through. But I do remember thinking that I was never going to look at my stoma like that, and I never have, because I thought, well, this stoma is with me for the rest of my life. So if I look at that with such negativity, well, you've done it. You've destroyed your life, haven't you? So
Absolutely.
I've actively never thought of that, even though I hadn't thought about the positive life that it had given me. I had certainly never looked at it and hated it. Sometimes I did.
Yes.
But yeah, that was like the beginning, really. And I just started to think, well, come on, like, you've only got one life. You can still walk, you can still talk. She's an athlete. And then it begins the whole thing in my mind of, well, if she can, why can't I?
Yes.
And I'm really very stubborn. As you'll probably realize, I'm very stubborn. And if I decide to do something, I'm actually quite obsessive, I suppose. I'm quite focused. So, so I thought, right, this is getting ridiculous. I'm out of breath going up the stairs. I have never been out of breath going up the stairs in my life. This is outrageous. I'm only 34 or whatever.
Yeah.
So I saw an advert for an an indoor cycling class.
Okay.
Hadn't been cycling for about 20 years, never cycled with my Stoma bag. But I thought, right, no, you're going to do it. Just go. Like, what's the worst that can happen? So I went, and I was worried because I didn't know where the toilets were, didn't know if my bag would rub when I was on the bike. And yeah, it was exhausting. I know that you're a cyclist, and when I stood up on the pedals, I could only do 2 rotations, and I had to sit down. I was exhausted, but I did it. And so I signed up straight away to do two to 3 classes a week.
Oh, that's so great.
This is what I'm going to do. And it was actually run by a local triathlon club.
Okay.
So I'd always wanted to do triathlons before all of this had happened to me. And I had been like so many other people and said, oh, I can't do that. That's too hard.
Yeah.
Oh, no, I couldn't do that. Oh, no, I wouldn't be able to do anything like that. But then I just started to think, well, they've done it. Why can't I? Of course you can do it. You can do whatever. And I started to think, well, do you know what, Gill? You have just survived the worst 3 years of your whole entire life. Numerous operations. You've lost your job. You've put on so much weight. You've had, I've started to develop panic attacks and severe anxiety and all of that. And I thought, but do you know what? You've actually come through that. So what's the harm in trying a triathlon? So that was the next thing that I did. I
So cool.
did a triathlon, a sprint triathlon. I was the only person in the club, obviously, with a stoma, and I had to contact the race organisers with all my questions about, well, what do you do at transition, which is when you're changing from one element to another. What happens if my bag leaks? Where are the toilets? All these questions. And, they were just lovely. They were so welcoming and, really put my mind at rest. And I did it. And that's part of what feeds into resilience for me. It's about like little, you just like little bricks that you put together that gives you confidence to keep going. So the first thing that I'd done is I'd accepted my stoma. I'd accepted that it had actually saved me from a life of incontinence. And, my first little break was my indoor cycling class that I went to, and I did it. And then I went and joined the triathlon, and I did a triathlon. And I thought, oh, I've done that. Right. I can do something else. And it all starts to bring confidence. It's not just confidence, really. It was about taking back control of my life. This event had happened to me. The whole life had gone upside down, back to front. But I just started to think, no, do you know what? I want to take back control. I don't want to be surprised by another event. I want to know that I can handle it. And that was sort of been my motivation, is to, just sort of, I like to confront all my fears because I don't like to be frightened of something.
Yeah. Yeah. You're gonna lean into it. Like,
definitely.
The American buffalo, there's the cow and the buffalo. So when a storm comes, a cow will run away from the storm and hide.
Yeah.
A buffalo will run right into it.
Yeah, that's me.
And so it's this whole like lean, when we talk about leaning into it, it's like leaning in, like a buffalo leans into the storm.
Yeah.
There's so, Gill, there's so much to your story I just love. So one is like the power of gratitude. Do you have I would call it a formal gratitude practice today? Or is it just something that's now just part of your DNA and part of your moment?
Yeah, it's part of my DNA, I suppose. But I've noticed like the power of your brain, how you can train it.
Yes.
So I've trained my brain to, like, my filter for my brain is basically, if this thought is not going to help me proceed, it's not going to make me happy, it's not allowed in. So with the whole coronavirus pandemic, for example, I was in lockdown just like everybody else, but I wasn't focusing on what I couldn't do. And I wasn't thinking about how long it was going to go on for. I was just like, right, yeah, but it's sunny today. I'm going to go for a nice walk. And then tonight I'm going to watch a nice film. And I have no idea how long this is going to go on for. So therefore, I'm not going to think about that. And, it is second nature to just sort of, you just have to keep it small and manageable. and take little things that make you happy. And I think that's really important, that people don't overwhelm themselves, because life is unknown. So don't spend all this time worrying about it, because it's
You can't
pointless.
control it. Yeah, you can't. All you have is this moment.
Yeah.
What was the community like? So I love how gratitude sort of got you into acceptance. And then you were, there's a little bit of like stubbornness to like, you know what, damn it. If she can do it, I can do it. So
Yeah.
what was the reception or the response from those early spin classes and the triathlon club? Because I imagine you're the first person they've ever met with a stoma.
Yeah. Well, I think, they were all really welcoming and lovely and friendly, and nobody was bothered. I certainly wasn't made to feel like I shouldn't be there.
Yeah.
And I mean, there's a lot of different ways that people deal with things, and you can probably guess by my personality. What you see is what you get. I wear my heart on my sleeve.
Sure.
So my approach to pretty much everything is, right, I'm going to talk about it. I'm going to tell you I have a stoma. This is what a stoma is. This is the bag. This is what's happened. A lot of people are very private and they don't deal with things like that, which isn't wrong. That's just people's personality. So maybe people in the Tri Club had known people with a stoma, but they hadn't realised. So I was probably the first person just to be totally out there. Just to say, right, I've got a stoma. I don't care. This is the crack. I might need to go to the toilet when we're out on a bike ride, and I'm grateful that I've got this sort of personality, because it's easier to deal with, I think, because I don't know, I get confidence really from just speaking out. I don't know.
Absolutely. And just owning it. So one question I was given during my recovery, because a lot of what you shared, I also went through. Like gratitude helped me see what I still had and could do. Because up until that moment, all I focused in on everything I lost, like my whole identity as an athlete, and was I going to be a provider? What kind of dad I was, like so similar. Got to acceptance. But I was still having some pity party moments, like when the hospital was dark and quiet, when visiting hours were over. That's when I got really low, and I unloaded on one of my mentors, and I was like, "This is so unfair," and just all this, as I was dealing with acceptance, trying to get there. And he gave me this bit of advice. He's like, "Hey, Michael, all the events in your life are neutral until you label them. So you get to choose the labels, so you get to choose how you wish to look at this." And then he asked, like, did this happen for you or did this happen to you? So when you think about your experience, Gill, do you see it as, well, this really happened for me versus to me? I was just curious as how do you view that?
Yeah. Do you know, this is the weirdest thing probably that you expect me to say, but it's the best thing that's ever happened to me in my life. It has honestly turbocharged me. It's given me a kick up the backside, basically, to say, right, come on, I was really fit and active as a teenager. I was on the hockey team, the netball team, I did everything. Drank my way through my 20s, as a lot of people do, wasted my youth, wasted my potential, took lots of things for granted. All of this happened, a lot was taken away from me. And it just really makes you appreciate the time that you've got and the potential that you have. And I just absolutely refuse at any point in my life to look back and regret not trying something. I get really frustrated with people when they say things like, "Oh, do you know what, Gill? I would love to try scuba diving, but I think it'll make me claustrophobic." And I was like, well, so did I. I thought that, but do you know what I did? I paid £10 or $20, whatever, for a voucher to try out scuba diving, and I wasn't claustrophobic. And I loved it. Like, when people say, "Oh, I'd love to do this, but,"
Yes.
what's the but for? You just do it. You just try it. You just give it a go. And ever since I've accepted what's happened, I've done so much. I've been skydiving, which was horrific. I've been scuba diving. I've cracked my fear of swimming in the sea. I've done endurance events. I've done so many things. I've done podcasts. I've been on the radio. I've been on TV. It's really transformed my life, and I'm just so grateful to be given all these opportunities to provide a bit of hope for other women who are going through what I was going through. Because to me, this is what this is all about. Like,
Yes.
this is what I said earlier, that when you're going through a traumatic experience, a lot of the time you're just surrounded by, frankly, miserable people who aren't coping.
Mm-hmm.
And I wanted to find someone who had coped and who was happy.
Yeah.
And I'm that person. And
That you're
I
that
want to
person for
show
so
that.
many people. Yeah.
Yeah.
That kicks ass. That's so awesome. So I want to go back to swimming in the sea.
Yeah.
So, because in 2023, you're going to cross the English Channel.
I am.
And for us here in the States, it's like that is sort of like the iconic like endurance swim. In the US, it's probably Cuba to Florida. That's a big one here. So why? So
That's a really good question.
Because you can, but like share with us about what went through your mind to say that's what I'm going to do next, and just where you are in your training and your prep.
Yeah. So yeah. When I did my half Ironman a few years ago, 4 years ago today, actually, I had to do open water. I'm frightened of the open water, particularly the sea. Very embarrassing me because I watched Jaws when I was 8. And yeah, but it took me a year and a half before I would open my eyes with my face in the water without having a panic attack. But a year and a half took me, gradually open my eyes for a few seconds in the water, not panicking. Anyway, that went on for a year and a half. And I've kind of cracked swimming in the sea, which was like a huge thing for me to
No,
overcome.
that's huge because it's so open. It's just
But I haven't done the swimming on my own in the middle of the ocean and swimming at night. But I absolutely know that I can do this 100%. And like you say, it's the swim in the English Channel. It's like the Everest of open water swimming.
Yes.
Definitely for the UK. And nobody with a stoma has done this before. A lot of people with stomas don't go swimming at all because they're so paranoid about the bag leaking, about people seeing the bag, all these things that prevent them getting in the water. And it's just sort of my way of going, look, for heaven's sake, I can sign up to swim the channel. This is how confident I am in the stoma products that we've got nowadays to enable us to live these active, happy lives. So it's a real, attention grabbing.
It is. So it's so cool. So how long will it take you? How long is that swim hours wise?
Yeah, well, it's 21 miles as the seagull flies, but it's not 21 miles because of the current. So it's probably about 25 miles you swim in total. And I think the average people takes about 14 to 16 hours. But
Oh, wow.
I mean, this is all dependent on nice weather, right tide and all that sort of thing. So I'm not really thinking about how long it'll take me. I'm just concentrating on getting it done.
Yeah, I just keep swimming.
Yeah, just keep swimming basically till I get to France.
Yeah. And so you have a crew near you, right? You have a support boat near you?
Yeah, well, I live in the northeast of England. I live about 9 hours drive from Dover, which is where we swim from.
Okay.
And in the UK, 9-hour drive is literally the other end of the world. So that's there's a big distance for us here. And but yeah, no, I've got my coach here, I've got my nutritionist and my physio. I've got my boat pilot, my boat down in Dover. I've booked them. I've got some Dover Channel swim camp coming up in October this year to do a night swim. Nervously hysterical laughter. I mean, at the end of the day, just the very fact that I've signed up for this, that tells me how far I've come. So yeah, I just think nothing ventured, nothing gained.
Absolutely. You got to give it a whirl. It's like,
Absolutely.
because you can, like, that's the thing. That's the thing. The magical thing about life is that when we step fully into it and we stop listening to those conversations that we're having in our head that are not healthy, we can do so much. Like
Absolutely.
we limit ourselves with our stories,
We do.
and stories from our youth, stories from society, that when we can quiet that chatter, we can do so much. And we start small. That's what I love about your story and your advice is like you chip away at it and chip away at it brick by brick. And with each brick, the story gets healthier, the story gets better, and we gain
Yeah.
confidence. And then
Yeah.
we look back like, well, okay, we did a spin class for you, your spin class, and then it was a sprint triathlon. There was
Yeah.
a half Ironman, and now this channel swim. I'm actually quite curious what you're going to do to top the channel swim. Like,
Well, I'm
you'll
quite
be
into
in
climbing, so be Everest next.
Everest, you do like a Kilimanjaro, you'll be out in Kona for the full Ironman. I it's so I love everything about your story, Jill. It just and now as we talked before we hit record, your trauma and my trauma, different traumas. But here's the thing. A lot of times we compare traumas too, right? And so that my
Mm.
feeling is like we're all going through something.
Yeah.
We've all had something. Some are as dramatic as yours and others. Some are maybe a little bit smaller, but it's still something. It's still stuff in our backpack that we
Yeah.
have to empty out. And through gratitude and getting to acceptance and having, I would say, the right Peloton in, like who are you riding with in life? Are they bringing out the
Yeah.
best in you? Or who are you swimming with in life? Are they bringing out the best in you? Like,
Absolutely.
through all that, you can accomplish so much.
You absolutely can. And this is why I started my Stoma Chameleon blog and website last year, because that was all during the coronavirus pandemic, and it was just misery absolutely everywhere. And I just thought, no, do you know what? People need to know that they can get through these awful times. People really need to know that there's always hope. And that's really why I started the whole thing up, was just to, like, a foil to what was happening.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I started this podcast, the Kintsugi Podcast, right around March, April of last year,
Yeah.
because I was like, I think we're going to need it. I think we're going
Yeah.
to need stories of optimism, of hope, and to embrace, in the spirit of Kintsugi, the Japanese art form, to embrace our scars.
Yeah.
To look not at your stoma bag as a sign of weakness, but actually it's a sign of resilience, a sign of our badassery that we can get through things. And in the early days of my recovery, when I looked at all my scars, I did see them as symbols of weakness that I had been broken.
Hmm.
And then through the lens of my youngest daughter, she was like, I think they're cool, Dad. And I was like, well, if you think they're cool, then maybe I can think they're cool. And then a few days later, I got the notion, or I learned about the concept of Kintsugi art. I was like, oh, that's pretty cool. Like we can have some breaks, we can have some scars or blemishes, and we can be put back together more beautifully. Like, and really just embrace all that. And so embrace
Yeah.
those blemishy, scarry, wrinkly moments, not as signs of weakness, but actually like this is how we triumph.
Yeah. I
This
love
is our
that.
strength. Yeah. So I think we still need some of those because the world is going to keep spinning faster and faster, and we're going to have, left turns and right turns. It's, that's, as you mentioned earlier, life is uncertain. All we have is this moment, to like really stay in it. So do you have just out of curiosity as we wrap up, do you have a mindfulness practice? How do you have something just formally that you do to be able to stay in the moment, or is it just part of what you've learned through your journey?
No, but I do a lot of cold water swimming, and that makes you practice mindfulness without realizing, because and then we're talking about really cold water.
Yeah.
So, you're getting into the really cold sea, just a swimming costume throughout the winter. And it's all you can think about is your breathing, about the air, about the sea. That makes you abandon everything else that's going on in your life. And that has really helped me with my mental health, just to force my mind to have those moments where it's just empty of
I love it.
everything apart from the cold water, my breathing, the tides, standing on a crab, whatever. Yeah, and that, because I'm not very good at being still, and I'm not very
Yeah,
good at my brain being still. So that's been the way for me to make my brain be still.
that's awesome. I love it. Do you know the gentleman named Wim Hof?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, he's a big cold water plungy kind of guy and breath work. And, he's got a whole bunch of people here in the States taking cold showers. So,
I have to say, I'm not into just being in cold water. For me, it has to be in a nice place.
Yeah.
Like the sea.
I also hear too that you need to be moving. That's one way for you to process everything. It's like to be in motion. As we mentioned, to keep swimming. So how do people find out about you? Obviously Instagram and other places. So can you share how they can reach you and also follow your English Channel journey?
Yeah. I'm on Instagram and Facebook as Stoma Chameleon. So that's literally Stoma and then the animal chameleon. And I've got a website, which is www.stomachameleon.com. And the idea behind the name is chameleons can just adapt to their environment and what's going on, and we're the same. So that's really where that comes from. And a little bit of the song, Karma Chameleon.
Yeah. It's a little culture club. I think it's a good band to be happy with. So, so cool. Gill, thank you so much for joining us and sharing your stories. It's so inspiring, and I hope people get motivated to do just a little bit more after hearing your story. So I love it.
Thank you very much, Michael.
Hey, there's Michael. Welcome back. Isn't Gill amazing? What a fantastic story. Just the grit and the positivity and the resilience to keep going. I loved it. I hope you loved it too. Crack on, as she would say. Get after it. Embrace life. Things happen. Things happen to all of us. Things happen to me. Once we can get to acceptance that things do happen, now we can get into some action. We can see our scars, or in her case, her bag, not as marks of weakness, but of strength. That's the whole Kintsugi spirit, that our scars, our blemishes, our wrinkles, our gray hairs, all of it, that's our story. We can either curl up in a ball and play the victim, or we can crack on and show the world all of who we are. Scars, blemishes, stoma bags and all, and embrace life. Take advantage of this one wild and precious life that we're all given, to pull from Mary Oliver. So I hope you enjoyed our interview with Gill. If you did, please leave us a note, leave a comment. I hope you'll also subscribe and just share this interview with your Peloton. That would mean a lot, just to spread her message and hopefully build a following to root her on when she swims across the English Channel here in 2023. So until next week in our next conversation about resilience, again, thank you for listening. Thank you for being part of our community. Remember to pause, breathe, and reflect. And of course, have fun storming the castle. We'll talk to you next week.